I'll repeat that. AI is not going to take your job, but someone who's mastered AI really well is going to take your job.
Welcome everybody to the Life Sciences Dreamin webinar series, which is kicking off the same exact way that the August Life Sciences Dreamin event did with our friend Ian Gotts. Ian Gotts is the founder and CEO of Elements.cloud and the absolute smartest person I know when it comes to all things AI and Salesforce. Ian is a relentless researcher on this topic, and his session at the two-day event in August had people on their feet, standing in line, waiting to talk to him afterwards. And I know just from watching his LinkedIn profile that this guy is doing everything he can to make sure he knows all of the things that are happening at the intersection of Salesforce and AI. We're so excited to have him today and want to one more time recognize all of the sponsors of the 2023 Life Sciences Dreamin event series, which includes Cloud Adoption Solutions, SDocs, Elements.cloud, Capstorm, Customer Times, Recipe Pro, Mind Matrix, Easy Protect by Adaptus, Salesforce, Steady State Media, Fido SEO, and Wise Wolves. So without any further ado, I am so excited to introduce you to my friend and yours, Ian Gotts. Welcome, Ian.
So thank you so much for that introduction. I'm not sure that anyone can say they're an expert in AI. It's moving so quickly. But what I want to spend some time is thinking about not necessarily how AI works. There are plenty of presentations out there, but more actually what it means for us. And the presentation is labeled FOBO, fear of not being relevant, fear of being obsolete. And I think that's a concern for all of us, whether we're in the Salesforce world or not. I want to spend some time thinking about the skills which are relevant, the skills which we need to learn, and spend a bit of time exploring that. As Shannon said, the technology is moving on so fast. I mean, we all thought we knew how things worked with typing prompts into ChatGPT. Now you can give it an image and it will tell you, it'll write code based on an image, it will interpret an image. So things are moving on so quickly. I joked that probably all I need to do is just present my LinkedIn stream of new announcements around AI, and that probably would fill 45 minutes. But I don't want to do that. I don't want to get locked into technology. I want to get locked into the people side of it and what that means for people. So let's set some ground also. First of all, obviously AI has been around for a long time. It's been around since what, 2016, which was when Einstein came out with Salesforce. But what really captured everyone's imagination was probably this time last year, when ChatGPT got launched, and suddenly we could type in prompts and it gave us back things that felt like we're actually talking to a human. That's stunning, absolutely stunning. You could say, you know, write me a song about a cowboy whose pickup truck left him or whatever, and it will write you really good lyrics. And that's only just accelerated. And as you can see from that slide there, it took 2 months to get to 100 million ChatGPT users. Interesting little side note, OpenAI, who created ChatGPT, didn't know what to do with it. They went, well, let's just launch it and see what happens. This is what happened. So, but one thing is, I want to make sure people don't think about ChatGPT as the endpoint. ChatGPT is so much, GPT is so much more than ChatGPT. You can use we're at the flip phone stage of the evolution of the iPhone. So there is so much further to go. And an analogy I like to use is all of us here can drive a car. There's a Honda Civic, amazing car. Every one of us can drive. Some of us have been lucky enough to drive what is a road car, but on a track. That's a Porsche GT3, $200,000 worth of car. Absolutely staggering when you drive it on the track. The levels of grip, the acceleration, the things you would never ever experience on the road. And you walk off having driven that and you think you're a Formula One driver. Okay, it's amazing. I now understand what it's like to be Lewis Hamilton, a Formula One driver. And then you bump into Lewis Hamilton in the pits and he shows you the steering wheel for his car. That's a Formula One steering wheel. I mean, somewhere on there is a button which is the launch control to get it off the grid. Any one of us, even if we've driven sports cars, wouldn't even be able to get the car started. We stall it even trying to get it started. So the point is that not using GPT was the Honda Civic. It's been a dramatic step forward in terms of using ChatGPT. That's the Porsche. But actually where GPT is going is where Formula One cars are. And we're only really at the very early stages of this. But it's accelerating so quickly. It's quite difficult to stay on top of all the technology. But it's not difficult necessarily to think about what it means to us and the sorts of skills we need to grow. And that's what I want to talk about. Again, at any point, please post questions into the Q&A, and I'll try and pick them up as we go along, or I'll have time to capture those at the end. So I want to play a video that Virgin Voyages created and has been very successful, millions of views. And I think just so you understand just how pervasive the AI is.
Hi, it's me, Jennifer Lopez, Chief Celebration Officer of Virgin Voyages, here to invite you to celebrate. So come, celebrate
your anniversary, your birthday, or just generally being fabulous.
Really, Kyle?
It's good, right?
Gen AI is supposed to be inviting people to Virgin Voyages, not doing whatever that was. Just give me that.
As I was saying, why not celebrate on an award-winning voyage with Michelin-starred chef-curated menus?
World-class destinations, award-winning.
Boring. I'll hop in there. I'll hop right in that suit.
I can't watch this. Give it to me. There's no kids here. That's all you need to know.
Oh, can I live there?
Gen AI. Invite your crew to voyage. Create your custom invite at virginvoyages.com.
It's not just a yacht, it's a super yacht.
So that's a really fun video, and you can go and find it on YouTube. But I think there's some really important messages that come out of that. Number one, the fact that people are making videos like that or ads like that shows that the audience understands the potential of AI, the ability to go and create an avatar that looks like a real person. So therefore, even though we're not all using this level of technology, there's a general awareness in the population about what's possible. Number one. Number two, the script writers are nearly back to work after 5 months on strike, concerned about AI generating scripts, that actors are actually being replicated by AI. And whilst they might be able to write some of the script, the idea behind that, just a brilliant idea of melding almost 4 different marketing messages into the same video. No AI is going to be that creative. So there is still always room for the creative to actually even think of an ad like that. And then the last point, which I think is slightly more concerning, is that clearly Jennifer Lopez can make some money out of that because she's well known. But all the actors in the background, maybe they in the future will be avatars, because actually they don't have, there's no differentiator, because no one knows who those other actors are. So there is a natural concern from actors, which is if all the people in the background are all avatars, then and where's the work going to be for the smaller actors, and then how can they grow to be the next Jennifer Lopez? So a number of concerns that come out just of that short video. For a bit of fun, I actually spent about an hour with several bits of AI technology, and I actually turned that advert into an advert for Elements.cloud, and I'm not going to play it, but in an hour I managed to take someone like Jennifer Lopez's voice, get her to talk about our new product, and it didn't take me very long. And I think that also then raises the whole issue about who owns the IP here. The video we made, we didn't claim it was ours, absolutely. We talked about the fact that I'm just doing it to illustrate a point. But with a couple of bits of technology and an hour's work and very little training on my side, I was able to spoof this video and turn it into an Elements.cloud advert. So this AI is actually changing things in some quite dramatic ways. So let's think about how this applies to all of us in the work world. So I think the first thing is actually we're not going to see brand new roles arriving. We're not going to find the prompt engineer necessarily, the same way as maybe I don't think anyone's got a job title, which is I'm the Google search person. What we're going to find is that actually we're going to have to gain new skills rather than having specific roles. I think probably a year ago, we thought that a prompt engineer would be a job title. I don't believe that's necessarily true now. That's the first thing. The second thing is that we're using AI as something which supports us rather than replacing us. So we need to delegate. We can't and we can't abdicate. We can't just go, AI will do that job. We don't need to hire somebody. Clearly, it is going to accelerate lots of the things that we do, but we need to be good at delegating that. And again, if you, we'll see a little bit later, but if you don't delegate very well, the answers you get back aren't going to be very good. It's just like the real world. You have an assistant or you have someone in your team, you ask them to do something. If you're not very clear about what you've asked, they come back with the wrong answer. Look at yourself and go, did I ask the question properly? Did I help the person scope what they needed to do correctly, rather than them having to guess what was in my mind? So AI again is making us think about how we delegate more effectively. So and a couple of things that we need to think about with the backdrop of the skills that I think we now need to double down on. And the next slide's got those skills. And what's really interesting is only one of those are skills that we don't currently have: prompt engineering. So again, I'm narrowing this down to thinking about what it takes to use AI to make Salesforce better, to help us change Salesforce more quickly, to make sure we change it in the right way. I'm not thinking about lots of different areas, other areas of the business. I'm focused really on the whole way, the area of managing Salesforce, of making Salesforce work better for our end users. If I was presenting this for how you change the business in general, I'm sure I'd have other things on the list. But again, let's focus just on what it means if you're in the Salesforce ecosystem, if you're a Salesforce professional. And in fact, probably if you're involved in any systems implementation, this list is still true. But let's spend time thinking about Salesforce. So I want to pick up each one of those in turn. Happy to take questions as we go along. But let's start with prompt engineering, which is this new skill that people are discovering. So the first thing, let's think about what a prompt really is. At the moment, people think about a prompt as, I'm just going to type something into Google, into OpenAI, ChatGPT, and I get a result back. They're using it almost like Google++. And they're relying on what the prompt is and relying on what OpenAI knows. But what GPT is very good at is actually, if you give it all the puzzle pieces, it can then solve that puzzle really well, using its ability to work out what the next best word is. And that's fine. We could do that just independently. We type something in, we get some answers back. And what we're discovering is the bigger the prompt, the more detailed the prompt, the better the answer. But what if we now take those prompts and embed them inside our applications? So it's generating emails for us, it's generating user stories, it's generating, so we're using it embedded inside the application. Often we've written the prompt and we've embedded it, we've attached it to a button, we've attached inside Salesforce. Think about everything they've talked about, say at Dreamforce around Prompt Studio. All that prompt could well be embedded in a third-party application, the same way as Elements.cloud has got those prompts. But when we think about that prompt in terms of the risk inside our Salesforce org, it's only slightly less risky than a virus. And let's explain what I mean by that. If you do something that's declarative, like a flow, that flow should execute the same every single time. We're not checking on it going, oh, I wonder if it executed correctly. Maybe after we've had, say, the 3 releases each year, we may need to go and check and understand whether that flow still works the same way. But we're not checking every day. The same as if we write code, that Apex has been compiled. It should run the same every single time it runs. But with a prompt, you're typing, well, that prompt is now hitting a large language model, a foundational model. And that foundational model could be changing. It's learning. It is being optimized by whoever is running that model. it's being tuned for performance. So therefore, the changes, the results you're getting for that prompt could change daily, hourly. So we've now inserted something into our application, which is to a certain extent slightly uncontrolled. And we need to think about those prompts as code, but code that actually is relatively high risk. So I think when people think about prompt engineering, they go, "Oh, that's about how I type things into a prompt." No, actually, it's a little bit more involved. And I just want to take you through a few steps just to maybe broaden out what I think prompt engineering really is. So the first is, if we think about prompts like code, we need to understand what the requirements are, and we need to create some acceptance criteria. So let's think about, we're going to attach a prompt inside a button so it will generate an email based on a customer success, a customer query to give a customer success answer. So what are the requirements? The requirements are generating an email, but what are the acceptance criteria? Not of can it generate an email, but is the email written in a way where it thinks we're going to get the outcome we expect, which might be either closing the customer query or upselling a customer or whatever that is. So again, we need to think before we start typing, we need to work out what the requirements are and the acceptance criteria, just like code. There's the famous cartoon, which is you guys start coding and I'll find out what we really need to do. So absolutely, we should be thinking about requirements and the acceptance criteria. Then when we write the prompt, we're going to have to write that iteratively. At the moment, if you're writing code or declarative, you've got a pretty good idea about, as you are writing it, what's going to happen. But we're still in quite uncharted territory here. So as we're going to write that prompt and actually go, oh, I wonder what the answer is going to come out, what the result is going to look like. And what we've discovered from a lot of work over the last year in terms of writing prompts is that it's quite subtle. You reverse 2 words in a sentence in the prompt, and it will come out with a dramatically better or worse answer. So there's still quite a learning curve in terms of being able to understand how to write prompts really well. Interesting, if our VP of product management, Sari Lazinski, he writes prompts really well. And we talked to him and said, well, why do you think that is? And he said, well, I used to watch Star Trek all the time. And Star Trek, they were constantly asking the computer for something. And writing a prompt is actually very similar to the ask the computer for something. So again, it's a skill in terms of writing these prompts. And it may take a while to really tune into the best way of writing them. If you think about when Google came out, we used to type things into Google, we got answers. I was lucky enough to be on Microsoft's Worldwide Advisory Council for 4 years. At the point they launched Bing. We actually said Bing was a really weird name, and they went, we've chosen the name, let's get on with it. But then people started typing and using Bing and going, it's not giving me very good answers. And actually, as a search engine, it's really good. But we had already been trained for years over how to put things into Google to get the right answers. If we applied those same queries to Bing, we were getting different answers because we hadn't been trained by Bing. And I think the same will be true here. As you start hitting certain large language models, it will train us to get to type in the prompts in a way where we get the right answers. We move to a different large language model, we might find that actually those prompts don't work the same way. So there's still quite a learning curve in terms of us working with a large language model to make sure the prompts we're writing get the answers we expect. And again, longer prompts, very detailed prompts get far better answers is what we've discovered. If you, let's take this back to the real world. If you said to your assistant, could you book me a restaurant? They come back and go, yeah, I'll book you a restaurant. Oh, no, sorry. I needed it next week. And then you go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And ultimately you get to the right answer. And that's how people tend to write prompts. They write a loose prompt and then say, could you make it this? Could you make it that? Let's rerun the restaurant request. Could you book me a restaurant next Tuesday because I'm entertaining a client who loves Indian or Italian food, and we'll be driving there and there'll be 4 of us. That's a good prompt. Suddenly we can now book a restaurant. And from what I've just inferred, we know how many places that we need to book for. We need parking space. It needs to be a certain distance from the office, and we know what style of restaurant. So we think about that analogy or that way of working when you're thinking about writing the prompt. Spend more time thinking about making it very tight and you'll get better answers. So clearly we need to, once we've written that prompt and we've now embedded it inside our application, we need to test that it's delivering the results we expect. Particularly if it's using metadata, it's pulling, say, particular fields from records. We need to make sure that all works. And then also the quality of that, in this case, the email that it's writing, we're happy with. So all very good. We're thinking about it like code. This is all as we'd expect. Now, the other thing is actually we need to think about managing versions, which is probably not quite how you'd expect code, because actually we're iterating versions relatively quickly for the versions of the code we've written, but also as the large language model changes, we may need to be tracking, okay, why is this prompt changed? And the version of the prompt versus the version of the large language model we're hitting. So we need to track a bit more information than just this is the particular version of the prompt. But again, we are actually got versions of prompts. We're storing them, we're iterating on them, we're improving them. And again, that's not something I'm seeing necessarily at the moment from things like Prompt Studio, is the ability to manage it almost like source control. And now we're going to get into a few things which I don't think exist in terms of managing code. The first is tracking prompt usage and performance. So we've written some prompts, we've embedded it inside Sales Cloud. It's now giving us an email. Now, we need to track whether, first of all, people are even hitting the button and reading the email and using that email, but also how much they're having to modify that email. Again, we should be coaching our end users not to go hit the button and then send email, but hit the button and okay, look at the results and then see how you need to tailor it. Again, GPT is really good at coming up with the first cut of something, but it's not very good at making it perfect. And I think we need to apply our skills on top to look at whatever's been created and go, oh, I'll just tweak that, tweak that, tweak that. Back to the delegate, don't abdicate. I can't just go, it's created a prompt, that's good enough. You need to read it and tweak it. But the point is, are we tracking whether our end users are having to make major changes to the emails that are being generated, or they're using it and it's not too bad? So we need to track that. On the back of that, we then need to work out how we refine those prompts back to this managing versioning. And then we've got an interesting concept called drift. I think I alluded to it at the beginning, which is as the large language model changes, then we're getting the results we're getting will change over time. And we need to track for that. We never had to do that in the past. We never need to worry about whether the compiler suddenly compiled and ran our code in a different way. But those results coming out will change. And if it's a high risk email that's maybe going out and making an offer to a customer of a discount or some offer, maybe we need to be checking that for drift daily or weekly. If it's an email that's, say, going internally, maybe monthly. But again, we need to put in place some way of reminding us to check and some way of monitoring that. And then the last thing on that list is, if our prompt is using metadata from an application, we need to know that so that someone doesn't go and change that field, not realizing it's used in a prompt. The same way as actually, if it were used in an email template, we need to know that's used in an email template before we start changing that. But actually, again, as I said, it's slightly higher risk because AI is taking some views based on that data and making some decisions for us. So let me bring this to life with an example. And there's a question that I've seen that's popped up that I'll pick up. Let's assume it's this email that it's generating is going to make an offer based on the value coming out of say an opportunity inside Salesforce. So let's say that opportunity is we're a US company, so it's in dollars, and that's fantastic. But then we go and acquire a company in the UK or in Italy, and suddenly we decide that field in the opportunity is now going to be multi-currency. We can put sterling, euros, we can put dollars in there, and we're going to create an extra field, which is the currency symbol. And that's great when we're actually typing this into an opportunity, because we can see that. If we didn't realize that the prompt was using that number field, it has no knowledge about this currency. It's still making decisions. And they may only be 10% off, because the differential between sterling and euros is only 10%. It's 20% off between sterling and dollars. And that may actually be material. So again, we need to think about a prompt not as, oh, it's like a clever Google search, but actually that it's really high risk code that we're injecting into our organizations, into our orgs. So I'll pause there for a moment. There's a question here. So the question here is, do we think developers will add prompt engineering to their skill set, or will prompt engineering be a job in itself? No, I believe that the concept of prompt engineering will be something that's not just for developers. Actually, it will be for, I know, business analysts need to understand what prompt engineering is. Developers clearly will need to do that. It'll be like a different form of writing code. Also broaden this out, being able to write prompts to get for GPT to do research for us will be something we all need to know, whether you're a marketer, whether you're a business analyst, whether you're a developer. So I've given a sort of made you think through the eyes of a developer. But if you think about what Salesforce is now doing, it's asking admins, business analysts, architects to think through the eyes of a developer in terms of what's being built. The more low code exists, the more we're actually becoming developers and need to have a developer mindset. And it goes the other way as well. A developer needs to have a bit of an architect mindset. So this, I think, is a pervasive skill that we will all need. It's not something we can go, don't worry, our team over there has got that covered. Now, roll the clock forward 1, 2, 3 years, and maybe there's a level of refinement, or maybe, I mean, AI has actually taken a different turn and actually is very good at coaching us into writing prompts. I've no idea. I'm afraid my crystal ball is as murky as yours. But from what I'm seeing at the moment, we all need to make sure we understand how to write prompts, and not just prompts, write really good prompts. But thank you, great question. So I said there are a number of other skills. Prompt engineering is clearly new, but there are a set of skills which I think AI is going to make sure that is going to bring into sharp relief, that it's going to accentuate the importance of these skills being really well honed and used. And I think if I look across the Salesforce ecosystem, and I've been around, 22 years now as a Salesforce customer, the Salesforce ecosystem has evolved very quickly in terms of Salesforce is a strategic application. It's critically important to organizations. And things like architecture, business analysis have become, data quality have become really, really important. And I don't think they've necessarily been given the amount of time that they really deserve. AI is going to force people to genuinely take notice. The A in AI is, the A stands for augment. AI will make the best things better. It will make the worst things even worse. Lovely quote I heard. AI punishes mediocrity. If you're not very good, AI is going to demonstrate that very quickly. So some of these skills I'm now going to talk about are core skills which we need to double down on. Architecture, think about Salesforce's well-architected program. They've put an enormous amount of effort into helping us architect Salesforce well. But suddenly with AI, we are now complicating that architecture even more. We're now obviously including external systems that are having an influence on our internal org. And therefore, we need to understand how that's architected. Where things like Salesforce Data Cloud, again, we're no longer just on the platform. We've now got Data Cloud, which again has got some architectural considerations of its own. And as you can see there on the right of the slide, these foundational models, the large language models, are external. And again, you don't need to understand what this diagram is, but you need to understand that this diagram actually is what our world looks like now, and it's getting more and more complicated. And making sure that we understand what we are architecting, or how our systems are architected, not just Salesforce, but the connected systems, is going to be increasingly important. I would say this because I've been on my soapbox the last 30 years saying business analysis is really important. but I think it's going to become the superpower for a couple of reasons. Number one is that as AI is enabling us to change the way our businesses work, we need to have the business analysis skills to understand how our business will change. This is not us going, I know how Salesforce works. I can slap a bit of AI on here, a bit of AI on there. I think it's going to dramatically change the way businesses can operate. And therefore, the business analysis skills of understanding what the implications are and really digging in before we start implementing AI is going to be important. Okay, that's number one. Number two, AI actually will supercharge a lot of the business analysis activities. But as I said, AI will be really, really good if it's got good content. So if you've got good business analysis that's working on the back of, it will be, the results will be fantastic. If you've done poor business analysis, then the results are going to be awful. So again, it's going to show those people who are really good at business analysis. So if let's think about some of those acronyms out there. UPN, that's the Universal Process Notation. That's the process mapping standard that's been around, I don't know, 10, 15 years, used by thousands of organizations. Salesforce has made it the way that they think that people should map. There are trailhead courses. And by the way, at the back of the presentation, which we'll be sharing with people, there are a whole series of links to trailhead links and so on, some useful resources. But UPN, there are trailhead courses, there are architect courses, the Salesforce Business Analysis Certification, which is that certification I've talked about. Part of that is how to draw process maps as UPN. ERD, Entity Relationship Diagrams. Part of the Salesforce architecture world, you need to understand how to draw out a data model. It's no good just understanding how the business works, but you need to understand the implications on how your Salesforce data is structured, which then leads to DFDs, data flow diagrams. If we're going to start using AI, we need to understand where the data's come from, how it gets transformed and changed down its sort of the data stream. So being able to map that out, and data flow diagrams is one of the Salesforce architecture standard type diagrams. MDD will be something new to people. It's metadata definition description. Sorry, wrong way. Metadata description definition. How should I document my metadata? So if AI can read your metadata, understand your org, it can make some recommendations. If you've got poor or zero documentation, it's going to do a very bad job. But we need to think carefully about how we document so that AI can read it. Think of AI as a 12-year-old who is completely focused, doesn't understand nuance, doesn't understand your weird acronyms, makes no assumptions, does everything absolutely literally. So we need to write with that in mind. Again, I think that's a skill. So what we did was we came together and we wrote a definition of how to write descriptions for metadata, which is what MDD is. So the outcome of business analysis is a user story. That's what we would pass to the development team. And a user story almost is a specification of that piece of work that needs to be done. And again, there are some standards out there, industry standards. So the industry standard is as a ... I want to ... so that I can. Very standard way. And then there are some acceptance criteria that goes with that. And then the testing is BDD, behavioral driven design. So there are some standards here about how you would deliver the specifications to your development teams. The problem is that user stories are quite laborious to write. As humans, we're not very good at writing them, but AI is brilliant. It really does a good job because it doesn't get bored. It doesn't get distracted. It writes really good user stories. It can write BDD, but only if it's got decent process content and decent descriptions to drive off. So that's why I think business analysis is the superpower, because if you have good business analysis, AI can drive huge improvements. So an 8-hour task could be done in 5 minutes. And that's really what we need to be doing in terms of accelerating our ability to change Salesforce, is make sure that that business analysis is done well, but more quickly, so we can start to make our organizations agile. So someone asked a question, what type of BA certification? The Salesforce Business Analysis Certification. The good news is that now you don't need to, there's no prerequisites. You don't need to be a Salesforce admin. Even if you don't take the exam, go and do all the training. Every one of us needs to be able to have those business analysis skills, whether you're an admin, an architect, a developer, or a BA, the ability to ask those questions, to probe, to understand how to document the business process. And I'll show you what that means in a moment in terms of how you could use how AI can actually superpower this business analysis. So I'm afraid it's also AI is going to make sure that we write decent documentation. I mean, they say data is the fuel for AI. Documentation is also the fuel for AI when we think about how we would go and make changes to Salesforce. And I know we're very poor at documenting orgs. We go, fine, I'm too busy for that. Again, AI is going to make sure it's suddenly made it documentation really, really important. And it's not just documentation, good documentation. Those organizations that master some of this stuff are the ones that are going to have massive competitive advantage. Someone said, is AI going to take my job? And the answer is no, it's not. Someone using AI better than you is going to take your job. AI is not going to take your job, but someone who's mastered AI really well is going to take your job. So it's, but we really need to get on top of this. We need to get good on top of architecture, on top of business analysis, on top of data governance, on top of documentation. So then there's the point about data governance. And in data governance is, if data is the fuel for AI, we need to understand, okay, which fields of the 10,000 in our org are important? Which of those are the ones that we can use for AI? But then from that field, we need to then work our way back up the food chain and go, how's that field populated? Really no different from dashboards. If the dashboards is what our executives are making decisions from, we need to make sure the dashboards, we understand which reports are feeding the dashboards and which fields are on those reports. They're the important fields. And then we need to understand how they're populated. Is it through a screen, and what are the validation rules? If it's through an integration or a flow, or through Apex that's populating it from a third-party system, let's go upstream and work out where that's coming from. And then data governance is actually putting some controls around that. Because it's no point if we've cleaned up this data stream and then we've got an intern pumping Excel spreadsheets in because they've suddenly been given access to data importer and polluting that data stream. So again, once we've actually understood which is the critical data, we need to go and protect that. So if we think about, where would we start with AI projects? Let's pick one area. Maybe it's, you think the service area could be improved through AI. Great, now it's probably the case object. We can now think about which record types on the case object are important. Then we can hone in on which are the key fields. And then we can start to think about, understanding how it gets populated. And as we discover this information as detectives, all that evidence that we're collecting should be documentation associated with the metadata, as process maps, as data flow diagrams, as ERDs. I've been involved in change projects forever. And I'm always looking for a catalyst, something which is going to drive the changes, and then me hooking the things which I know are important onto the back of that. So if AI is forcing us all to make changes, great. Use that as the excuse to go, right, before we make changes, let's make sure we've thought about the architecture. We've got data governance mastered. We're doing some decent business analysis and getting some good documentation. Don't miss the opportunity of AI getting the executives' mind share, and then use that as the catalyst to go, these things need to be done properly, otherwise AI is not going to work, or it's certainly not going to support us long term. And I'm sure everything I'm talking about, you people in the audience are going, yeah, I know we should be doing this. Great. AI is the way that you can make sure you get the time and the investment and the resource to do it properly. So what I want to do is just show you, I'm not going to run the video, but actually I'll jump across, just show you what's possible. This happens to be Elements.cloud. What we're doing is, because we know about metadata, we know about the industry standards like well architected, we know business processes, could we write user stories and come back with some solutions? So let's just jump out of that and jump over here. So this is a UPN diagram. So I'll just spend a couple of moments just talking about UPN. Some very simple principles. The idea of UPN is it's simple enough that everybody can understand it, no matter what level of seniority, no matter what area of the business you work in, it all works in a very similar way. So the idea, there's an activity box and the text starts with a verb: develop, run, appear, analyze. You have inputs with text on them. Every box should have a line input in and out with text, because the important thing about the text is it defines when that activity is finished and what the handoff is to the next step. In terms of who does it, or who's involved, who's supportive, who's informed, there are resources associated with it. So VP of Marketing is accountable, COO is supportive, marketing team are informed. So it's called RASCI, again, an industry standard. And you could drill down to the next level of detail. So instead of having every single activity box on one page, so it's unintelligible, have 8 or 10 boxes and then drill down to the next level of detail. And then link, that little eye, you can link to things. You could link to documents, to web pages, and so on. So a very simple approach called UPN. Anybody can do it. You don't need any special tools. Elements happens to do a very good job of it, and you can go and play with it inside the Elements playground. But again, this is a skill you'll need to master. But the reason I've raised this is that if we've documented these processes like that, then we can get AI to build us user stories. So if you remember, let's go into edit mode. If you remember, I said user stories are really laborious to write. So if this developed marketing strategy, it would have to write 3 user stories, one from the perspective of the VP of marketing, one from the COO, and one from marketing team. The same here, campaigns, we're writing a user story for every resource type. So I could highlight, a couple of boxes, and I could say, generate the user stories for me. Is it tied to a release? Well, maybe it is. Is there a parent requirement? So if I've already got requirements, I could tie those user stories to a requirement. I could tag it as something, tag it as marketing. And now it's off writing user stories. There you go. So if I go and let's go and have a look at a user story. So here's a list of user stories that's just been created. Let's have a look at that one. So here's a database of these user stories. And there we go. So it's written it as a marketing team member when demand generate. So you see it's written a fairly detailed user story. And here it's written the acceptance criteria. And what we've discovered is that in using this internally for the last couple of months is we've gone, oh, that's not a very good user story. And then we've gone back and looked at the process diagram and gone, no, we didn't do a very good job of that, did we? If we'd written a better and a more accurate process map, would have got a better user story. So it's interesting, it's coaching us into actually writing better stories, writing better processes so it can write better user stories. And again, this may not be 100% correct. You can edit this. You don't have to just go, I accept it. Yeah, fine. It's done a lot of the work for you. And then you can use your expertise to go and refine it. So that's really cool. But then the other thing you can do is, because Elements understands what's in your org, the hundreds of thousands of metadata items, I can then ask it, it's now live, it's going to the org, and it's now, this is not a screenshot, this is genuinely, it's going through and looking at across the org for this particular user story, what objects, fields I could reuse, do I need any automations and so on. And again, using this internally, we've discovered that it's identifying metadata items we'd forgotten that we built that we could reuse. Now, again, you don't have to go, yeah, I completely accept that. But again, it's doing quite a lot of research for you very quickly. And all of this is dependent on a couple of things. Right, one, can we write decent process maps that the application can read to be able to write the user stories? Number two, have we got the right skills to work out whether these user stories are correct and we're happy with them? And three, if we have decent metadata documentation, AI can do a great job of pulling out the fields, the workflows, the automations, the record types, the email templates, whatever's needed to go and deliver a solution. So that's just an example of what's possible, and why I think business analysis is this superpower that will become more and more important as AI starts to touch every area of our Salesforce implementations. I'll pause there for a couple of questions.
Elements.cloud.
Let's go to the next. Yeah, so there's a good question just come in, which is Elements GPT, it's showing waste. Yes, it's identifying technical debt, and it's helping us reuse items to reduce technical debt. So I think that there are a number of different use cases. That's the first one. I think the other really interesting one is, supposing you're the consultant or an BA, or you're an analyst in a firm, and you want to prototype something. You could map out that area, and then it could write the user stories. And if you then made it run this against a DevOps, which is completely clean, you could very quickly identify what you need to go and build that prototype. So there are quite a few different places that we can start to use this. And I said that little example there of business analysis, process map, user story, recommendations. An 8-hour task was reduced to about 5 minutes. But that can only be applied if we have strong business analysis skills. We are able to understand whether AI's come out with some decent answers and validate those. So again, back several slides ago, we talked about we're not abdicating, we're delegating. We can't ask it to do things we don't understand. Someone said to me, is GPT any good at writing JavaScript? I was like, I have no idea, because I can't write JavaScript, so I have no idea whether it's any good. Can it write good user stories? Yeah, it can, because we've spent weeks and weeks optimizing those prompts. But I know what a good user story looks like, because that's what my world is. So again, we can't expect it to do things that we don't understand what the answers are. So hopefully that answers that question. I'm conscious we are getting close to time. So I want to leave you with some things that are actionable, which is, what can I do today, sitting here as a BA, an admin, an architect, someone in the Salesforce world, or a developer? The first, I think, is you need to think about how you reinforce those core skills. The BA certification is really good at that, but go back and think about what data governance means. Think about how to do that business analysis. Take stock of how well you're documenting. And as I said, there'll be a bunch of resources that will help you do this. The next is, if you haven't used ChatGPT, and probably there are very few people who aren't there, but get hands-on with ChatGPT, but think of it through the mindset of more detailed, more explicit prompts, and then see how much better those answers are going to get. Not, can you tell me about, who won the Battle of Hastings or whatever. Don't do things which are associated with its knowledge of history or knowledge of the internet, but think of it as a way of, how can it solve problems where I give it the puzzle pieces and it's really good at solving the answers. So let me give you an example of that. My daughter's a songwriter and is in a band, and the band, they wanted to get rid of one of the band members because he actually hadn't been engaged for several months. And we said, okay, well, there's a termination clause in our band agreement. So they agreed what they wanted to go and do, how they wanted to terminate based on the clauses, but also some other things they wanted to offer. So I gave GPT the entire contract, because it wasn't that big, and 4 bullet points for what they wanted as the output. And it wrote a pretty good letter of termination, including some very nice sentences about how we've appreciated his input and so on, things I probably wouldn't have thought of. Did it do a perfect job? No, it didn't. We had to tweak it. But again, it didn't need to have any knowledge of the band or the stuff they'd written. So I gave it the puzzle pieces. I gave it the contract, and I gave it some of the bullet points of what I wanted to come back out in the contract. And I was quite explicit, and it came back with a really good answer. So when I say get hands-on with ChatGPT, approach it from that perspective, not I've just playing around, I've given it a few sentences. What can it tell me about the world? Think of it as a very good puzzle solver. Which then gets me to the next point, which is about mastering prompt engineering. If you've got prompts that you're writing down and using, are you storing them so you can then evolve them? So you can go, I'll reuse that. This is actually templatize that so I can reuse it. So again, I'll use an example. Savri, who leads is our VP of product management. Their team his team has created a series of prompts which generate a website, which is our internal website talking about future releases so that our customer success teams, our account teams, marketing can all have early view of what's coming. That website is built by GPT because they've built some very detailed prompts. The prompts are multiple paragraphs long, but they insert into those prompts 5 or 6 bullet points about a release. It then writes the HTML code and writes the website. So what are you doing in your organization about finding out who else is using GPT, getting those prompts in a central database, evolving them, thinking of them as templates and reusing them, rather than sitting every day at GPT and typing in every time you're typing it in from clean. So start thinking about this prompt engineering idea rather than thinking it as, oh, I'll just type something into Google. And the last is start thinking about which GPT apps will support you. So clearly you've got ChatGPT, but there are a number of apps. Elements.cloud is just one of them, where those prompts and AI is already embedded in it, and they're taking advantage of it. People like GPT-5, iDialog, Metazoa, Us, Native Video. There are a number of organizations out there now where they're taking and embedding prompts inside the application to take advantage of AI. And again, I'm not expecting to start using them, but at least start looking out there and seeing what's possible, what's out there. And there's some great videos. So quick questions come in and says, I've seen people using ChatGPT to help making prompts they want to ask it. That almost feels quite iterative, but I have seen examples of that. And if you go and find, I'm not sure I put a link in the next slide, but if you go and find Salesforce DevOps Net, a guy called Vernon Keenan, he's been talking about how he uses AI, GPT. He's written some prompts that create the starting point. So it helps you go thinking like an architect in the financial services industry. I want to. So it actually sets up part of that prompt for you. And he's got a term for it. I think it's called ACP. So if you go to salesforcedevops.net and look at one of his blogs, it talks about how you can use GPT to write some of that early setup in your prompt. Again, very early days of this, but great question. So there's a set of resources there. I'm not going to read those out, but they will be available. So let me just summarize this. I think the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. You may think AI is for other organizations and it's never going to get to you. There are people out there who are already leveraging AI in a huge way, and it's going to come to your org fairly soon. So therefore, now is the time for action. I'll encourage you to start, go back through that action plan that I set out, because things are moving so fast and we all need to be on that train.
Well, I don't know about everybody else on this call, Ian, but I just canceled all of my afternoon meetings so I could start writing user stories using GPT. That had me fall off my chair for a little bit. So incredible. Thank you for sharing all this information. Ian, can you tell everybody where they can find you, please?
Oh, yeah. Find me on LinkedIn. Ian Gotts is easy to find. Happy to connect on LinkedIn, or Ian@Elements.cloud.
Incredible. Ian, thank you so much for sharing all this information. Once again, you have updated it with the most interesting information that is out there available on AI. Love the concept of prompt engineering. And I think that's something that we're all going to be working on, training our little internal 12-year-olds on how to answer the questions we want them to answer better. Thank you so much, Ian, for your continued support of helping everybody in the Salesforce ecosystem learn a little bit more about how to use AI to their benefit. And more importantly, sharing it with the folks who are following the Life Sciences Dreamin event series, which we are so excited about. We've got a really great webinar coming up next month on Partnering 2.0, which was another really popular session at the 2-day event that we had last August. Exciting announcement coming out soon about next fall's 2024 edition of Life Sciences Dreamin'. Thank you to everybody for joining. Thank you to Ian for sharing all of these resources. We will send out the recording along with his list of resources so that you can try to keep up. But I encourage all of you, connect with Ian and follow him on LinkedIn. I learn something new from him every single day. Thanks very much, Ian. Thanks to everybody for spending your time with us, and have a wonderful day.